and chaos magic was one of the big things for me that kind of tied everything together. But it then made me go back to the old traditions and stuff and look at it with new eyes. And I think when you do that, it really sort of goes like, wow, like Catholicism without all the fear or without all the like drudgery and stuff like that is really potent. And especially working with saints, it just, yeah, like I've basically said to myself, I wouldn't care if I dropped every other system I knew about and just work with that, because it's just so complete to me.
Hello, and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Today we welcome Robert Peter, who is a chaos magician with an interest in all things occult. Now, his practice of deity and communication and veneration has found a home within the framework of Catholic belief, specifically working with saints. And today, Robert takes us through how he developed his practice and details some of the successes he's had with clients through the intercession of the saints. It's really interesting stuff, and it's quite an avenue that we haven't really explored in some depth on the podcast before. So I hope you get something for it. I think it can be a nice addition to one's magical practice if that framework works for you. Now in the Plus show, we get into some of the details of how Robert's style of practice works and how to approach saints, what to expect from them. And he has some interesting tales from us there. Now do check the show notes on this one, because there's a lot of links to the various different saints that I mentioned in the show that might be of interest to you. Now, if you want to hear the Plus show, simple thing to do, hit the links at the bottom of the show notes and you'll find all my links. But the link to the Patreon is the one you're looking for, and that's where we do all the bonus content and extended Plus shows. So that's it for me. Let's get on with the show. Cool. Robert Peter, you're very welcome to the Spirit Box. Nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. So we exchanged a few messages. What was it, about a month ago, something like that?
Yeah.
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 And initially about a statue of Kali that you were very kindly given away, which turned out to be too big for my altar. But you mentioned some of the work you do with saints, really interesting stuff, and shared a couple of stories, and I thought it'd be great to get you on the show and share some of your wisdom in that area. So, without me waffling on any further about our interaction, can you tell the people about your work and who you are?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Robert Halls. I'm on Instagram as Robert Peter. At the moment, it's RH Deity Specialist, which we'll kind of get onto later in the podcast. But I would mostly identify as a chaos magician. I know these days there's a lot of like labels and stuff like that, which I think sometimes detracts from the overall work. But in order to give people an idea of kind of where I'm at, chaos magician is probably the most appropriate.
Now, you mentioned when we were conversing about how you had brought in a lot of saints and different deities into your work, and had kind of developed kind of a robust practice, but also were kind of helping other people develop their practice using saints. So could you take us through how that kind of developed for you, and maybe some of the stories about how it panned out for people?
Yeah, sure. So it's a long story, which I'm sure we'll touch on in many aspects, but it's kind of not linear. It kind of like happened here, then happened there, and then went back to the beginning, then went to the end, then went to the middle again. So yeah, it's quite complex. But it all really started with Thoth, and yeah, just tapping into sort of that like mercurial current and communicating really. And then it was kind of like, right, go here, do this, touch on this, do that. And it was through working with a couple of saints for clients that they then kind of found me and was like, oh, we'd like to work with you. So I actually got introduced to it. I kind of got like Saint stalked in a way, but they jumped in through that and then like, right, all the stuff you've learned can all be done through this. So yeah, it was amazing, really. Because I've been looking for a practice that had everything that I'd learned anyway, rather than dipping into other stuff and dipping into other stuff, because it's really fatiguing. You know, it can really, really, it's like, oh, have to jump into this again and maybe learn this system, and it's a lot, especially yeah, in magic, like systems, oracle decks. You know how it is. It's just on the brain. It's very, very tiring.
So when you say kind of they jumped in, how did that happen? What was that like?
So how do I put this? I was working with a particular client who had a very dire financial need, and I searched through every system I knew trying to do it, like trying to sort it out for them. Went from everything. I'd use like Goestic stuff, and like nothing was working. Even stuff that had a surefire way of working before, nothing worked. And I was like, right, why isn't this working? What's going on? I used like Kabbalistic methods, like everything I had under the sun, nothing worked. I got really ill while it was all happening, and had this, how do we say it? I guess illness-induced vision of Saint Expedite, and it was like, work with me, basically. Didn't know who he was. Saw a Roman saint, and I was like, "Oh, no, you're a saint, and I know you're a Roman." Then off the back of that, it just then spiraled or snowballed, however you want to put it, and then more and more happened. Yeah, there's quite a lot. So you're unpacking a huge bag of stuff here.
And what you, like, as you said, you weren't familiar with Saint Expedite. You said, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Expedite.
Expedite. Yeah, and so it was a totally new contact, not in your wheelhouse at all. How did you go about kind of learning how to interact with it?
So I'd had a lot of experience interacting with spirits, organically outside of like any system anyway. Like, I channel spirits all the time. That's part of what I do. Hence the deity specialist and stuff. Like, you want to chat to a spirit, I'll talk to it. It doesn't matter who they are, what they are. I'll just go in and do stuff. Um, so it's really easy to contact him. Didn't look up any methods on how to do stuff. Like, I just asked him. I was like, right, so if you're the person to sort this out for that client, can you do it? Within about 24 to 48 hours, he'd already sorted it out. And I had the client messaging me saying, like, amazing, everything come through exactly how you said it would and everything else. So yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Because we had done a divination prior, basically, as with everything. But it didn't show exactly how it was going to come about. I think I was using a traditional Rider-Waite deck at the time, and there was a lot of chariot energy and like 8 of Wands. So it was kind of written in the cards, because when you actually did that class, but it wasn't. It was kind of like letting go, and dare I say it, letting God, right, and then letting the pieces just like fall into place.
Right.
So,
and when did you first realize that you were communicating with spirits?
when I was like super young, so like most people, it's kind of like a generational thing. It's always in the family and gets passed down, passed down. But
Yeah.
I used to come with quite a lot of attack, like hell of a lot of attack, because I was so open, and I had a lot of like really weird experiences when I was younger. The first time I kind of got into more occult, if you will, symbology, etc., was when I moved into my new house when I was about like 12, I think it was. Came under quite a lot of attack and jumped up out of bed, got my compass out of my pencil case and carved the Sawillow rune and a hexagram into my bed because it was metal, and it stopped instantly. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but it stopped. And I was like, right, okay, I don't know what that was, but yeah, cool. and then it kind of died down from there. But there was always stuff that happened. I went into searching. I went searching basically, sorry, for answers. So I ended up going into the spiritualist movement and trying to look there because it was the only thing that was kind of exploring like spirit communication and stuff like that. So trying to figure out what was going on. But what I found, not to put down the spiritualist movement because there are some pluses to it, but it was very, there wasn't many answers basically for the questions that I was asking. And when I asked those questions because they didn't know the answer, there was a lot of like fear response. So it was like, oh, you don't do that. That's not real. Like, people can't do that. You shouldn't talk to this. You shouldn't talk to that. So it left me with a lot of, a lot more questions, and then now a bunch of sort of fear surrounding it. Whereas before I wasn't fearful, I was just curious and kind of excited about it. So.
And in terms of kind of the initial, I say that you had that kind of that fearful spirit contact to start with, which sounds personally familiar. When did you start to kind of be able to understand it, start to manage it a bit more, and kind of understand a bit more what's going on? It doesn't sound like the spiritualist church gave you a bit of a framework, but not hugely. The reason I ask is, and the reason I'm really interested in your work is, I'm from a Catholic background. So the Catholic framework was what I was trying to kind of understand and interpret what was happening. And it's not a particularly pleasant framework for understanding what's happening. I mean, you know, Islam is the same, right? You know, it's like anything outside of kind of like direct with the good guys is jinn, you know, and equally the Catholic faith is very suspect in certain in how it views the spirit world. It's very binary, you know, in my experience anyway. So it didn't really help me, you know. It kind of just let me. I think that's particularly fair, but it wasn't a helpful system for me to operate in, because it was that those attacks felt so kind of intensely then tied with the kind of the kind of punitive morality within Catholicism.
Yep.
It's a very long question.
No, I kind of get. I definitely get what you're talking about. It was kind of that like similar thing with the spiritualist thing though. It was like they only understand it as that. So there's a very interesting thing actually in Catholicism, which they call demons of air, right? The demonic, the demons of the air, which if you look at it from sort of a chaos magic thing, they're thought forms, right? They're negative thought forms. So you light this candle, you bless this candle, and it keeps away negative thought forms. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like looking at the Catholic framework with new eyes. And that's what I'm talking about in regards to like how I found like Catholicism. We're using Catholicism as like a magical practice. Is that you go around all the houses. I was in like a couple of magical orders and stuff like that as well. Because I was just searching basically, and just went anywhere and everywhere trying to get wherever I could. And chaos magic was one of the big things for me that kind of tied everything together. But it then made me go back to the old traditions and stuff and look at it with new eyes. And I think when you do that, it really sort of goes like, wow, like Catholicism without all the fear or without all the like drudgery and stuff like that is really potent. And especially working with saints, it just, yeah, like I've basically said to myself, I wouldn't care if I dropped every other system I knew about and just work with that, because it's just so complete to me. But you have to go into it with, well, like knowledge really, and open eyes, and really kind of, yeah, like sort everything out. And even when you go back to spiritualism, even with that same mindset, if you strip away all of the sort of like negativity and people's interpretations of it and stuff like that, then it is a very, very workable system. And I guess the same with Islamic teachings and everything else. It's moving more away from like the exoteric stuff and into the esoteric, I find. But even with Catholicism, it's a bit more esoteric than most, if you look at it that way. But even then, they do like a 60-40 mix of exoteric stuff, and it's the exoteric stuff which I think muddies the waters. So they have solid ways of getting rid of stuff. I mean, especially if you're in a say block of flats and you've got 60 people above you, that's 60 people's like thought forms buzzing around. You whip up one of those like Catholic candles that deals with the demons of the air, and you watch it go away, and then you think, there's something in this. You know what I mean? You can't deny that. So then it makes you look at the other practices and kind of explore that further. But I completely understand like where you're coming from in regards to the sort of, I guess you would say, psychic scarring, right? And like
yeah. And like, I certainly kind of, I don't have this view of Catholicism as this like terrible, weight that I have to carry. I don't see it that at all. Like, I mean, I think it has things wrong with it. Like anything has things wrong with it, but I certainly find strength in a lot of Catholic prayers. Even though I'm not a practicing Catholic, I still, and on my altar there's the Virgin Mary, and she'd been with me since I was a child. So whenever I had those periods of being afraid, the Virgin Mary's always been kind of there, as part of my practice, and there are a couple of saints in there that get kind of like daily prayer as well, daily devotions. But I'm really interested in that, like that candle to drive away the demons of the air. I mean, without turning it into kind of a make and do class, like what does that entail? What does that structure look like?
I think you can find like the majority of the information online that can explain it a lot better than what I can. But it essentially involves getting a candle and blessing it in a certain way and doing certain prayers over it. So basically, you're imbuing it with a particular type of energy which deals with a particular type of energy, right? So if you have like the positive and negative end of thought forms, you're imbuing it with basically it's like an air purifier of energy, like clearing away all the negative thought forms like constantly. So yeah, like in the most basic way I can possibly put it, that's it. And it's actually really easy to do. But if you're approaching it from, what's it, like chaos magic, sorry, I'm clicking again, aren't I? If you approach it from a sort of chaos magic perspective, it involves that you really, really get involved in that system and give your all to it. And interestingly enough, what I found is that a lot of people are really adverse to using Catholicism or Christianity in a chaos magic way. Because from my experience anyway, a lot of people have moved into chaos magic because of all the dogma surrounding Christianity. So it's kind of like chaos magic on hard mode, if you will. But in doing so as well, without getting too much into this now, because we could really go down on the rabbit hole with this, is that it really clears a lot of stuff out. It really makes you test why you believe certain things. So yes, it's powerful, super powerful. And I would advise that I'll go on a limb here and probably potentially get a lot of DMs saying, "Oh, screw you, you don't know anything." But it really helps you out. It helps out your practice like massively. So yeah.
That's cool. I'll have to look that up. That sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more. I do quite a lot of candle magic, so that would be interesting to kind of delve into and understand that a bit more. So you had that kind of fever vision. Saint Expedite, am I pronouncing that correctly?
I don't think he minds as long as you know who you're talking about, right?
He turns up, and you do the working with him, and extraordinary results.
Mhm.
So this is the kind of framework for going, okay, this is a
Yep.
new relationship. It's shown dividends already.
Yep.
Where did you go from there?
I backtracked basically because I was working with a bunch of deities at the time. So going back to the mercurial tangent I was on earlier, I went from Thoth to Ganesha to Papa Legba to Odin, and then it was Saint Expedite or Expedite was the next one on from that because he's quite a mercurial spirit anyway, and it didn't really make the connection at first, and then it was like a natural transition into him. And then once I worked out what was going on, I was like, no, it's perfectly fine for me to do this because when you work with a lot of deities, I like deities and I like to have relationships with deities, and I don't just treat them as like a dialer result sort of thing. Like you have to be respectful. At least I am anyway. At least I take that stance. So yeah, it went back onto him. I went back to Thoth, and then it was kind of like, no, you go on this path and you see where it takes you. So I started working with him a bit, and then interestingly enough, it had some really big synchronicities in my life. So my partner is obsessed with Our Lady of Guadalupe. Has loads of paraphernalia like all around the house. Obsessed with the Virgin Mary. So basically, it's been there the entire time, and I wasn't really like massively into it. Um, so yeah, from that, jumped on a train, funnily enough, to my parents, ordered a book the day before. I think it's by like Julie something. It's like an encyclopedia of saints. So I was like, right, I wanna know what's going on. Like, I really want to know what's going on here. That turned up at the house before I'd opened the package. My mum told me on the same day that she found my old Saint Christopher that had been missing for years, literally years. Um, but yeah, so backtracking, sorry, on the train here, I was like, well, Guadalupe, if you're worth your salt, like, let's go. Like, I'll talk to you. Was talking to her the entire car ride here. I said, look, I think I was like behind on a bill, like 200 quid or something. So I was like, all right, if you're worth your salt, help me out. Like, I'm not going to like chase after you and like give you praise for nothing. You need to show me that you can help me. And I'll help you and I'll be your friend and stuff. But first off, you need to show me you can help me because I'm not like lighting a candle with you every day, and I'm not building a relationship with you straight off. Like you show me that you can do stuff for me, then we can talk. And I knew in my heart of hearts it would be like a big thing. Um, and yeah, opened the car door, a bird flew into the car. At the same time the bird flew into the car, I got a message from an old client of mine booking in for the exact amount of money that I needed. I was like, right, here we go. Okay, we're good.
Brilliant.
So yeah,
That's fantastic. I love those things. They're a
literally
bird as well. That's really
pinpoint time. Yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah,
fantastic. Um, and and where did it go from there? Kind of, who else kind of rocked up? So you're like you got Saint Christopher kind of popping his head in, and then you got this big relation,
yeah.
big impact.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I'll backtrack to the St. Christopher. So, the in regards to like syncretism and stuff like that, I kept having like Anubis pop up, and I had quite a big relationship with Anubis like a while ago. Anyway, from one of the magical orders I was in, like we really gelled like flat off the bat. He communicates with the dead. I communicate with the dead quite a lot. It was yeah, it was a match made in heaven, literally. And when I started working with him again, and then the St. Christopher showed up. I then found out there was him and St. Christopher's energies are very similar, and I was like, right, okay, there's something in this like massively. There was a part of the story I completely forgot about actually. So when I started working with the 40 servants, there was some stuff in regards to the saint there as well, and I had like a really big draw to him anyway. And this is actually before the Saint Expedite stuff. And yeah, and I just kind of like left it on the back burner. Um, so in regards to his affiliation with Saint Cyprian, I was kind of afraid that I couldn't really go into a sort of like a Christian thing and do magic. So there was a lot of like, oh, you can't do this, and I felt like really crappy about it because I just found this amazing thing that worked, but it didn't marry up with my old beliefs and my old way of working with things. So there was a bit of a lull until Saint Cyprian basically stepped in and was like, no, like you can do this. It's all good. So yeah, that was the next step. And then it just kind of still unravels from there, and it's still continuing to unravel to this day. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, Saint Cyprian and like Tommy Kelly's 40 Servants, for me, are one of the best, if not the best way of introducing like archetypal energies.
Yeah.
On such, it's like you would think it's an entry level thing, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more you work with them, the more you realize the amount of hard work and just thought, literally being servitors. Yeah. But yeah, that's gone into them. Yeah, it's amazing. The deities use those cards and use those servitors to get to people.
Yeah,
and it's great. Yeah, it's huge. I'm just gonna move my microphone. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, cool.
Oh. But yeah, it's quite profound, really. Yeah, and then the whole Our Lady of Guadalupe thing basically carried on. The Our Lady of Guadalupe thing carried on, and then I kept having visions of a dead lady. Didn't know who it was. Thought it was just a random spirit showing up until I realized that she was commanding other dead spirits. Loads of synchronicity later, Santa Morte shows up.
Right.
Got me massively into like candle magic, and basically showed me the ropes for everything else that would then establish my practice in Catholicism in regards to like devotional candles, novenas, and everything like that. And then from then it was just hello to all the saints. And what's really weird is that I've done quite a lot of work with Our Lady of Sorrows, but Santa Muerte actually like was the precursor to my relationship with Our Lady of Sorrows.
Right.
Because what it did, it showed me that the level of devotion that Santa Muerte requires is huge. Like if you're a follower of her, like you work with her before anything else.
Right.
And I believe Our Lady of Sorrows requires just as much, if not more, devotion. So yeah, it was perfect. Like I couldn't have planned it like better myself.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really good.
And in terms of like how you communicate with the spirits, what is that experience like for you? Like, is it auditory or visionary, or is it instinctual, or do you get a sense of that's real, that's not? I mean, in terms of the message, like.
Yeah, it's mostly like everything.
Right.
Like yeah, in regards to channeling, like you know when you're channeling the spirit, and you know when it's a thought form, impersonating them.
Well, that's interesting.
What I try and do is I wait for the spirit to contact me. And most of the spirits that have contacted me have been ones that I've like never really thought of. Yes. So they weren't in my head.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I know that spirit has that association, or can do that and brings about that result. Like when Ganesha showed up for me, I was going to sleep. I'd been at an event all day. I was at like a Love and Light event reading all day, and it was just like, I was like, I want more than this. Like, this is not where I want to be. I want to be like doing like more deity stuff. And it was literally like a Disney castle, if you will, like Disney intro castle. And then Ganesha comes dancing in, and he's like, "You want me to do stuff? Like, I'll show you how to do stuff." From there, everything opened up. Wow. So yeah, it was huge. So
so it sounds very visionary.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
getting like quite glassy. I think about it because it was like such a profound moment.
Yeah.
Didn't really expect to ever work with Ganesha, like, and
Yeah.
a lot of these spirits I've had like my entire life. So yeah, it was great.
It,
So yeah, it's a lot of like visionary stuff. I get visions. I get like can hear stuff as well. So if you go based on like the Claire system, like all cylinders are firing, basically all pistons are firing. Sorry,
mhm.
but yeah, no cylinders in there. Sorry, I'm so terrible with sayings and stuff.
Yeah, I mainly find it kind of I get a lot of stuff like in vision,
Yeah,
which sometimes can be hard to separate from imagination, but I get auditory stuff as well, and that's,
yeah,
you know, I know exactly what that is. That, you know,
yeah,
that's a very distinct, separate voices to me.
yeah,
But I mean, the last couple of years, it's all um like it's witch spirits. That's witchcraft spirits. That's all I really work with, and all that kind of come knocking on my door. But it's interesting on how clear the auditory experience can be. I had kind of an initial vision that kicked the whole thing off, and that thing was
yeah,
that was fucking mental. Like that was one of
yeah,
those ones where, I mean, I talk about it as being kind of like the difference between like a kind of a shitty, like old, like taped over repeatedly VHS tape, which a lot
yeah,
of the younger members of the audience won't know what the fuck we're talking about.
yeah, yeah,
But a kind of shitty old VHS tape versus, like, you know, 70 mil fucking crisp IMAX level
yeah,
vision. That is just, it completely changed my life, really, you know.
mm,
And one that I couldn't talk about for a couple of months, you know, just blew my
yeah,
socks off. Yeah. So I'm really interested in kind of
yeah,
what that experience is like for other people. That, like, the how you absorb it,
absolutely.
you know?
Yeah, it's a lot like literally like all the experiences that I've spoken to you about on here. Is the first time I've spoken about them
Right.
like publicly. I'm not a
Yeah.
private person anyway because I think that if you so one of the things I found, just sort of explaining my reasons why, is that I used to read online, and a lot of times I'd like do a reading for someone, and there'll be someone in the room that was like, "Oh yeah, that reading was for me." I'm like, "No, it's not." So you tell people about like experiences and stuff that you've had, and because they can visualize it, they then get attached to them, and what that does is then block their own experiences from happening.
Mm.
So I think it's very good to keep a lot of stuff personal, and I've seen a lot in sort of like working with deities is that like Saint Cyprian's one of them. Like one person has an experience with Saint Cyprian, and then like other people want to work with him, so they kind of like they don't clone it, but
Mm.
they, you know what I mean? They're like, oh yeah, I had a really similar experience with Saint Cyprian.
Right.
And that could be that the spirit is just working on that similar thing,
Hmm.
or it's that the person is artificially manufacturing that experience.
So, like,
And
project.
in which case, yeah, and in which case, like later on down the line, they don't that they just ditch the spirit, or they realize that it was in fact a projection.
Mm.
So
That's pretty interesting. That's a good take. Um, yeah, it's very strange stuff, and one of the things that kind of one of the areas where I'm able to kind of go just to discern, okay, that is separate from me, you know, because sometimes, you know,
yeah,
I'm having a, you know, an experience, but you know, I come away from it
mhm.
going, am I just talking to myself or talking to an aspect of myself? What am I doing with this? You know.
Yeah,
But then you have those very separate things where you're like, no, that wasn't me, you
yeah,
know. And
no,
there's absolutely no grounds for confusion there. You don't walk away kind of stroking your chin about that. Like, you're very much kind
mm,
of like, that happened.
yeah,
But you still get the other stuff too, you know.
yeah, yeah. There's been actually interestingly enough, like once I was working with Santa Muerte, it didn't go quiet for a while but I felt she was trying to do something and I wasn't quite sure what. So it normally happens like on event days, like when I go and do readings at like events and stuff.
Yeah.
And I got the train to Hastings, and there's an event in Hastings. Got off the train, and I saw this spirit next to me, and he was like this really good-looking Hispanic man, hair slicked back, and he was trying to talk to me. And he was like basically saying about implementing deity work more for the public, and basically communicating with deities for the public, and doing it on, I guess, a less woo level, like
Yeah.
basically doing it practically, rather than being like, oh, they want you to go and do this, blah, 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 blah. It was like,
Yeah.
right, no, this is how they can impact your life as it is right now. So, yeah, and it was Jesus Malverde. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's the angel of the poor. He's a Mexican
Oh,
folk
wow.
saint. And yeah, his story is like fantastic. I won't really get into it too much now, but basically, when he died, he screamed out like, "God, I will help my people." So it's almost like he made a oath on his deathbed and then
Wow.
came back, if you will. He's not like a canonized saint at all,
Right.
but he came to me and I was like, I didn't know about you. I didn't know about you at all. And then I was working with Santa Muerte on something, don't know how it came about. And then there was this statue of her with this Mexican guy. I was like, that's him. That's the guy. Looked into it and they've got a really good relationship.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, yeah, that works. So yeah, he's pretty cool.
That sounds awesome.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of like leads you. I think as long as like you follow that path, it just leads you where you need to be anyway. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people like really like stress about where they're going.
Yeah.
It's like spiritually, but they don't just let stuff happen.
Mm-hmm.
They don't listen to like what's happening. So
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's really key with this? Is just to kind of listen and you know take your time with it and try and digest it?
yeah, because if stuff's happening around you that is intrinsically linked to the relationship with the deity, then you'll miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're too in your head, then you'll miss it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find that when you're really working with the deity, like the synchronicities are everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. And you might say, well, that's because your mind is looking for it. Then stop looking for it, and it will just happen anyway. And then you'll be like, no, that's crazy. Like with Jesus Malverde, it wasn't that I questioned it because I knew exactly what it was like, but I got a train the day when I worked out what it was, and I was like, well, okay, fair enough. So in pop magic, Jesus is obviously, oh no, sorry, sometimes affiliated with Superman, like being a solar deity. There's like a famous thing of Superman on a cross. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy gets up on the train, Hispanic guy, with a Superman t-shirt on, with a massive like mustache, and I'm just like, come on, man. Like after a sign, like, this guy just got up out of nowhere. I was like, okay, all right, yeah, we're
Yeah.
doing this. So yeah,
That's really
it's great.
interesting.
Yeah.
So you're all this stuff is kind of constellating around you, and you're starting to kind of work with the spirits, with the saints. You had some great success initially doing client work. So where did you go from there? What was the next step? How did it develop?
So with Santa Morte teaching me how to be properly devoted to the spirit, because up until that point I was basically a messenger for other people. And through that, she's wholly deaf, right? And if you think about it, saints are kind of dead. And if you look at it from like a Catholic point of view, even if she's not canonized saint, she rules technically over those saints because they're spirits. So she would introduce me to other saints. And I was like, is this all right? Because I'm kind of dedicated to you. But she's like, no, like I'm good at everything. And she is. I don't know if you've spoken to any other like people that have worked with her, but she is like 10 out of 10. If she doesn't want to do something, she won't do it. But if she does, it'll be done so quick. like you won't even have to worry about it. It's ridiculous.
Mm.
Especially in spirit removals and stuff like that. Like you give her some coffee and a cigar, and that spirit that's gone, basically. Like you don't have to worry about it anymore. Which is really good in cases of like getting rid of crappy entities that are around. So maybe use her if you're interested. She's pretty good at it. So yeah, she was like, I'm good at everything, but these guys are good at what they're good at. Like it's almost like they're specialists essentially. And what she said to me is that like, yeah, you can work with like these spirits like Thoth and etc., but they didn't live. These guys lived. They know what people go through. They know human emotion, and they're not so like lofty, if you will. Not that spirits are lofty. Like, I don't want to like insult any spirits, but they know what we went through. So it kind of gives you a lot more of a connection with them, if you will, because I think in certain stuff there can kind of be a separation. Like in the New Age movement, they're very big into archangels, but they don't necessarily tell you how to apply that into like practical situations. And from working with, like, say, servitors and everything like a chaos magic sense, um, it just allows you to apply esoteric stuff to real world situations. The reason why I prefer saints to, say, working with servitors, because I did consider at one point making saints or servitors out of saints, but they're like particular ones. So you have like Saint Anthony is like, I don't know, the caregiver, like so on and so forth. But where they are so intrinsically linked to it, if you would call like universal sort of like order, if you will. Like if you view God as sort of like the divine celestial being that controls everything, that even if you throw a spell out, that it won't work because divine law goes, nope. If they're in with that, then they won't let stuff happen to you for the bad, if that makes sense. So you might say, Saint Anthony, go and find my car keys, and then he's like, no, because you need to go and look for them. And by going to search for your car keys, you're actually going to find this box of stuff that you forgot about, which is going to help you with your thing that you're going to need to deal with in like 3 days. And then you're like, well, what do I need to deal with in 3 days? It's like, go and look for your keys. You'll find the box, and then you tell me. And then it happens, and then you're like, right, okay. So if they're doing things for like your highest good, then yeah, like I'm gonna do it, because it takes a lot of like pressure off yourself. Like what I found, sorry, one sec. What I found was like really influential was Grant Morrison's speech. I can't remember what thing it was. I think it's like Disinfo.
Disinfo, yeah.
And he was like, yeah, you can do all this stuff. And like part of my whole thing was like sort of convincing people that the magic is real, because like in the circles I was in, like no one was doing it. So I was like, right, like no, this stuff is real. You can do it. But then it got to the point of like, why are you doing it? Like you can get everything you want, but why? Like what's the main thing sort of behind it, right? So then it comes into sort of like a true will kind of thing of like finding what your overall goal is in life, and then when you're working with saints, like they will help you get there. So it was kind of like a bunch of servitors that can talk to you back. They can tell you what the best thing is to do, and actually take a lot of pressure off your shoulders.
Yeah.
When you look at it like that, like ish, I guess, if you want, like Catholicism becomes a bit better, because the saints aren't just there to kind of like lean upon. If you have a crisis, you have direct experience with basically like the people on the ground, if you will.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, it was great. I found it great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that like because you mentioned there about like saints, you can just lean on them for when there's a crisis, but it's probably not the right approach. I mean, a foundation of devotionals to those saints on a kind of on a regular basis. Would you recommend that? Well, yeah. How would you approach working with a saint in that light?
So I think that you tend to find like a lot of people find saints in crisis. Like I know a lot of the ones that I found were in crisis. I kind of had like a nudge to maybe strike up a conversation here and there, but it was more a nudge that in a minute you'll need to strike up a conversation with that saint. So they do kind of find you. After that, it's kind of like if someone does you a favor, you never really forget about that person. You know, they become like a lifelong friend. So like someone that used to look after your dog for you when you were younger, so you could go and like work your really high pressure job in London. You never really forget that person. At least, well, if you're a stand-up person, you probably won't. And I think it's the same with the saints. Like you build that relationship with them, and then they're there if you need them. What I found is that going back to what I was saying with regards to working with like deities and saints with other people, is that through working with them in that way, they're kind of on your team if you want, or like they're on your Facebook or your Instagram friends, right? That if you ever need something, you know who to contact, and they're always going to be there. So they're like, for me, they're like the best group of friends you could probably have. They're not high maintenance at all. You can light a candle to them and just say, oh, I was thinking about you the other day. I remembered what you did for me, and you know what? I don't even need to light a candle to you or give you this offering or give you this like public praise or whatever, but it's there. So thank you. And it's not like from working with some deities where it's like really high maintenance. They seem like a friendship that's pretty one-sided. You know, it's like you really have to like bust your balls to like get anything out of them. You're like, why am I even bothering with this? You know what I mean? Like they don't care about your best interest. Yeah, they can get the job done, but you'd much rather like if you had the choice between two plumbers, you'd rather phone up the plumber that like comes around, is all jolly, like gets on the job, does it, then you talk to and have a chill mic after, rather than the one that turns up, demands that you pay his bill for the McDonald's that he had to get on the way here from the service station when he didn't even have to get that because he lived around the corner and he went out of his way to go to the service station, um, and then do all that. Like you're gonna pick like the better one, aren't you? So yeah, Saints just make more sense to me.
If people want to follow you and find out more or book a reading, what is the
Yep.
best way for them to do so?
Instagram is the only thing I go onto these days. I made a TikTok and then I looked at it and then just went, no, I'm good. Like it will be good to spread influence and stuff like that, but I'm good. I will just do Instagram. I'm on Facebook as well, but that's like more my personal thing. So
Yeah, sure,
yeah,
sure.
Instagram will contact me.
Cool. And you have an Etsy shop as well.
Yeah, I do. It's not very good. It's not very like professional, if you will. But I offer like novenas and stuff to saints and like personal
Yeah,
workings and stuff like that. So
brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant. Well, fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and really
no
illuminating
problem.
it. And I think a real step change for the information that we share in the show. So thank you very much for making contact and sharing your
No problem.
fantastic knowledge with us.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I hope you enjoyed that. Do check the show notes. Lots of links in there for you to explore and maybe do some further research and see what works for you, what's interesting to you. That's it from me. I'm Dara Mason. You've been listening to the Spirit Box podcast. Take care and talk soon. Bye.